Okay, we'll call this meeting to order. This is a meeting of the local planning agency meeting of the Village of Tequesta. It is January 21st. We'll call the meeting at 5:49. And Lance, may I have a roll call, please?
Jan Strand,
Here?
Steve Egan,
Here.
Elizabeth Shower, Ashley Warren,
Here.
Liz Asher,
Here.
Teresa Maggio,
Here.
Margaret Wilson, Holly Young.
Here.
Thank you. And Board, I'll turn it to you right now. If I may have a motion, please, for tonight's agenda.
I'll make a motion to approve tonight's agenda for the LPA.
I will second that.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Our next item is the approval of the previous meeting minutes of August 20th, 2020. Did y'all have a chance to review the minutes?
Yes. I'll make a motion to approve previous LPA meeting minutes.
I'll second that
All in-
motion.
Thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. We have an ordinance, we have actually a few ordinances on here, and I will read the title of the ordinance, and then I'll turn it over to Mitty, right? You want to do that?
You
one?
can just
Okay.
read the number, you don't have to
Okay,
read that
we
whole
are
thing.
looking- Our first item agenda is ordinance number 01-21.
Thank you, ma'am. So I guess probably the easiest thing to do is for all these, I'll go page by page and sort of explain what the ordinances are. This first one is a change to the village's code to adopt essentially fertilizer best management practices. This comes to you by way of as is written in your ordinance, a strong recommendation of the village's environmental advisory committee. So, and also was supported by the River District. There was a lot of input. There was a bunch of research that the committee did. These are very common ordinances. They're actually a very good environmental ordinance. So this is coming to you, and it changes several sections of your code. And I'll just go through the substantive portions, if that's amenable to the board, and certainly I'll answer any questions that you have. But the big picture on this is that this ordinance revision adopts the Florida Department of Environmental Protection's best management practices for fertilizer application and kind of models the village's ordinances off of that best management practice guidance document. So that's what happens on page 3. We reference the FDEP BMPs, as they're called, specifically for golf courses, as is the case when we're in any ordinance. For subpart 1 on part B there, we just added reference to the Right to Farm Act just to clean up language that was there. Page 4, you'll see 10 and 11. We added 2 additional exemptions, vegetable gardens and also land being used for bona fide scientific research. With the vegetable gardens, it's so long as it's more than 10 feet away from a water body. You'll see that that's a theme that continues on throughout the ordinance. Section 78-393, that's your definitions. Some of these definitions were removed from this section but put in a subsequent section, so it's not as much of a deletion as it appears. But there also were some new definitions. Code enforcement was added in case there are violations. Landscape plant definition was added. Just some cleanup, kind of just to make sure the ordinance is consistent. Person was defined and the village was defined. The deletions, again, I'll talk about those in a little bit, but they carry over in a different section. Section 78-395, the shoreline considerations. The substantive change there is that they are recommending an increase of the number of feet from 6 feet to 10 feet. That, again, is making this ordinance more conservative and trying to help facilitate improvements to water quality and just a lack of negative impact to water bodies from fertilizer application. So that's the substantive change in that section. Maintenance, 78-399. There are some revisions to the yard waste, grass clippings, and those kinds of things do have an impact. So they're trying to address how we, in the village, how residents are keeping things out of storm drains so it doesn't end up in the water to have a negative effect on the water quality. And then the real meat of it starts on page 12, the fertilizer management portion. you'll see, I should have said this at the beginning, but as is the case with all ordinances, anything that's double underlined is newly added language. Anything that's stricken through is proposed for deletion. So this is really the meat of the fertilizer management portion of the ordinance. It talks about what it applies to, when fertilizers can be applied. As I said before, it carries over some of the definitions that were in the other code section into this section with regard to applicator and application, best management practices. Pretty standard definitions, but again, coming from that DEP guidance document. It talks about what percentage on page 16, what the fertilizer content can be, and limits the types of fertilizers that are applied. We then get into when you can apply them during either, during different times of year, depending on what the wet season and dry season are, so that again, we're minimizing the fertilizer that is running off people's yards and golf courses into adjacent water bodies. So that happens on page 17. 18, the same 10-foot restriction is now carried over, and some additional language just to clarify when fertilizer can be applied to different plants at what times of year again. Training, there's training inserted in here to ensure that, especially in the commercial context, those who are applying fertilizers that have been known to more severely impair water quality, that those folks are trained to appropriately apply it so that it's not being over-applied and it's not causing problems throughout the village. And again, a licensing requirement is added on 19. So again, this is not newly created. This comes directly from the DEP guidance document. Many jurisdictions adopt fertilizer ordinances just like this. They're actually environmentally a good thing. And then the last substantive change is just to 78.416, which now says that if somebody were to violate this in the village, we can enforce our ordinance through the code enforcement process under the village code and under 162 of Florida statutes. So with that, I'll try to answer any questions. Again, this came from the environmental committee, but it does track directly to the state guidance in hopes of mitigating fertilizer impacts to water quality in the area. So with that, I'll answer any questions.
I have a question.
Sure.
On page 17, under timing of fertilizer application, section A, it states that they don't want to put fertilizer containing nitrogen and phosphorus down between June 1 and September 30th. And saturated soils, tropical storms, etc.
Mm-hmm.
At the very end of that statement, it says not during dormant periods. Can we finite that a little bit clearer for people who are not familiar? In other words, I'm thinking about the person that's moving to Tequesta from New York as an example. And I do this all year long. I'm a property manager, so I'm working on this. But to me, that's very confusing. And I'm thinking, again, of the person coming into our area that's not familiar, goes to the website, whatever, and pulls this up, and it ends with not during dormant periods. So is there a way that we can make that a little bit more clearer?
We can recommend, I think what that's specifically referring to is dormant periods of the plants themselves. Mm-hmm. So the first part
Which would be in your winter months, correct?
If it's dormant.
Presumably,
Yes.
it should be. I mean, it should track with seasons.
Mhm,
In Florida, that gets a little weird
Yeah,
because
it
our plants here
vacillates, yes, I
our
understand,
plants are
yeah.
not exactly that consistent. But
Well, just to back up a minute, so outside of the rainy season period and prohibited times, fertilizers containing nitrogen and phosphorus shall only be applied to turf or landscape during growth periods, not during dormant periods. Well, I think we should, my opinion, we should put something in there that finites when we don't want them at all, when we don't want them to apply. Or maybe when it's roughly the best time.
What'd you say?
I'm just trying to think of
maybe the best way to address that is a definition, an additional
There you
definition,
go.
because
Yeah.
it is a plant specific thing. So I think
Well,
it
we
needs to be
can't-
tied
yeah,
to the plant.
Yeah, we can't get down that far, but to give them some general terms, and again, like I said, I'm thinking of somebody coming in from up north or out west, it's completely different than what we have here. Particularly with our Floratam and our Bahia grasses and things like that. It's a different, it's a different mindset.
So should the LPA approve this, we can certainly carry forward a recommendation that additional definitions be placed
Sure,
to
sure,
clarify what
absolutely.
growth periods
That
and
was just
dormant.
something I saw when I was reading it. I was like, wait a minute, how do we do that? I'm trying to put myself in that position. How do I do that? And do it correctly as they're suggesting.
Any other questions?
I do have one correction, I think.
Uh-oh.
It's on page 13 at the bottom, under definitions, letter B, applicator, but it continues on where it's one of the rules, no fertilizer containing, and it carries on to the next page. Shall be applied.
Oh, yeah, I think I think you're right. We'll
That's
fix
just an
that.
oversight, just a correction there.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
It's a great board, they read. We love that.
We try.
Well, that's why when you asked about the agenda earlier, I was like, I got one of those. I had it flipped over because I was looking at the numbers.
Yeah, yeah.
Any more questions? No?
And I've made those notes for slight revision, so your motion can just be as, with the revisions as stated here tonight. You don't have to specify particular language.
Okay.
Okay. Can I have a motion?
I make
we-
a motion to,
I'm sorry to interrupt
Oh,
you.
go
If we
ahead.
could take public comment, I don't
Oh,
know
I'm sorry,
if we
yes.
have anyone, but if we
Yeah.
could just,
We'll open to public comment and we'll close to public comment. Okay, Leslie, you got the floor.
I make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance number 01-21 with the revisions as discussed tonight.
Perfect. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Okay. Now we are moving on to ordinance number 2-21.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
I'd like just to clarify the next three ordinances. They are actually something that us, during the year, when we do site plan reviews, when we get phone calls from potential applicants or zoning inquiries, as we do our job, basically, Lance and I and our legal, we found some inconsistencies in the code or some things that was not contemplated in the code. So we have an active glitch list. Every time that we found something, we put it in our glitch list. And usually, once a year or every 2 years, we update the code. So it helps us when we do our reviews. The zoning code needs to be a tool in our toolbox that allow us to, for example, calculate parking, to, definitions and all set of requirements. But as every code is not a perfect code, we are always amending and improving our code. So the next coming three ordinances, they are part of our regular glitch list, and we actually did a workshop with council back in October or November, and we presented with a glitch list, and then we presented to the council, and they allow us to move forward and propose ordinances to actually improve our code. Yeah.
Sure, so as Nilsa said, this is, this ordinance 02-21 is primarily a consistency cleanup ordinance. In section 78-4, the table in the middle of page 2, that table didn't match the zoning code, which said whether places of assembly were permitted or special exception uses in this zoning district, the R/OP. So this is just essentially correcting what was an error and clarifying in the notes, adding an additional note to make very clear that this then matches the rest of the zoning code language. The second change to the definitions was to professional service, to delete out the medicine, including healthcare facilities and medical or dental offices. As Nilsa said, there are implications for parking, and this language was inconsistent in how the parking was calculated. So this is to just make clear and make more accurate what professional service means and what it encompasses, because there are separate requirements for those medical facilities. So they shouldn't, that language shouldn't have been in there. And then at the bottom, it just very clearly enumerates that healthcare facilities, medical and dental is not included. So again, just clean up. Next page, page 3, section 78-296. Again, this was an inconsistency whereby these fuel service stations, the code was inconsistent, so we had to change the language to make sure that what it said in another section is clearly represented here. Again, just a cleanup for consistency. Section 78-299. This one we encountered, it changes the screening height to 6 feet. There was one place in the code that said you couldn't have it more than 5 feet, but another section said you had to have it at 6 feet, so it didn't match up. So again, as Nilsa said, this is just as part of their day-to-day review of applications, things where we've been like, wait a minute, this doesn't work. The final thing was just a very minor deletion from 78-335. There was a duplicative introductory phrase there, so we removed that. But again, these are all just cleanup and consistency edits, not substantive changes to the code. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you may have.
Any questions, board, on ordinance number 2-21? May I have a motion?
Sorry, if we could take public
Oh,
comment,
public
sorry.
comment. Sorry. We'll open it to public comment, we'll close it to public comment. Okay, you have the floor.
Oh,
Go ahead.
okay, I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 02-21.
I'll go ahead.
Who's got the second?
She does.
Okay, I second the motion.
Okay, thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
No.
Motion passes. Okay, moving on to ordinance number 3-21.
Okay, so this one, there is some substantive revision. Again, and Nilsa, you can speak to this if you'd like, but this was another instance where Nilsa and Lance, doing their job, identified kind of a missing portion of the code, or a portion of the code that there are other things popping up in the village that were not contemplated by the code. So this section makes several changes. A couple are consistency, but a couple are substantive. So we'll start at the beginning. Section 78-4, the bottom of page 2, we're adding a definition of specialty, restaurant comma specialty. So you'll see in the village code, there are several other restaurant slash carryout, restaurant, regular, there's a couple of iterations, but we're adding a new definition here for specialty restaurants. There are a couple of things who have come into the village, a couple of corporations. I think a gelato shop was one. A couple of things have popped up that didn't fit squarely within the existing definitions in the village's zoning code. So this is being added to address those types of establishments, and then also specify in what zoning districts they can go. So 78-4 gives a definition of specialty restaurant. Then the next several sections allow them as permitted uses in the C1, C2, and C3 zoning districts. Those are the revisions to 78-176, 78-177, and 78-178. You'll see the strike, or excuse me, the underline, double underline, just to add specialty restaurants as permitted uses in those commercial zoning districts. The next revision is to the mixed use code section 78-180. This is on page 7. This again adds the language to subpart 10 with regard to restaurants to add the specialty restaurants. And then also a correction in this ordinance, the top of page 8, to add shopping centers to the mixed use list. And Nilsa can speak to this one.
Yes, maybe 2 years ago or something, somebody called and said, and asked us, I want to buy the Fashion Mall Plaza, and I need a zoning determination letter. And I said, yeah, not a problem. It's a simple task. You open the code, and you look at the use, and you just confirm that in that zoning district, in this case, mixed use, the Fashion Mall Plaza has been there for many, many years. So you would think that shopping plaza was a use that was included in that mixed use district. Well, it was not.
And it was a retail shop.
Oh, boy.
So, it's never a boring day. So it's supposed to be simple zoning determination letter just to say, yes, the use is included in the mixed use. So, but it was not there. So I did a lot of research trying to find out what was the problem. But at the end, the truth is we needed to include the use on that mixed use. Because right now, again, if you open the code, that shopping plaza use is not contemplated on the mixed use district. Across the street where the other plaza, the Marshalls and Homewood, that's commercial, C2. So it is included on C2. But on the mixed use, so it was not. So basically this is just taking care of that, and that's how we use the book, the code, and we have questions, that's the reason we have our glitch list.
So that, as I said, that adds shopping center to the list of uses, as Nilsa said, that were probably inadvertently omitted way back when. One other change on page 8, the same page, there was an inconsistency with regard to the fuel station / gasoline service stations. In one section, in this prohibited section, or prohibited uses, it included these gas stations in the, so I don't think you have the code, I think it's in J through K. But another section said you could have them, so one section said you could, one section said you couldn't, and the distinction is whether they're fronting on US 1 or not, so we added language to make that consistent. And then the final substantive addition is the change to 78-705, which adds parking space requirements for the newly created and newly inserted restaurant specialty category, so that when Nilsa's reviewing things, she knows how those are supposed to be parked. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
I was just curious, how is a specialty coffee shop just different than Rancho Chico?
So I think the easy answer, or the short answer, is that the other definitions of restaurant they distinguish based on whether you carry it out, whether you eat it inside, whether it's a to-go function. So I think your coffee shop example probably fits in specialty restaurants now, because you can either carry it out or you can stay in. But those, and same with this gelato concept. If you can get your gelato and go, or you can eat it inside. But again, none of those, with the other definitions in the existing code, it either said you had to get it and go, which is carry out, or it was like a drive-through option. So these are just to basically reflect what's going on in these establishments and allow them in the village. So it really has to do with where you're eating the food that you're purchasing is what it comes down to. And the village does have kind of unique restaurant definitions, and having those carry out, that's not a common, they have many versions of restaurant, many more than in any other jurisdiction I work. So this is just to contemplate the different things that have come into the village. I hope that answered it.
I'm not sure.
Do you mean by like the location, meaning the usage, like as it's written in the code, like where it's like R1, R2?
That's
Like,
where they
so,
can
like,
go.
the coffee shop is in more of a residential area where Rancho Chico's in very much a commercial area? Is that like?
Well, it does both things. Go ahead.
So essentially what the problem was is that we have some coffee shops and whatnot, and based on the retail food establishment, which includes all the restaurants. Some, for example, were beverages and whatnot, whereas we have it as restaurants, and restaurants depict, you have to have like a certain size kitchen, a certain size of spaces that you can sit, etc. Whereas a lot of coffee shops and gelato shops, you don't do that stuff. They didn't really fit under that category as a restaurant. So that's why we're including specialty restaurant, because it's kind of one of those specialized places where you won't sit down really to have like a gelato or whatnot. Most of the times you'll take it to go, coffee as well. So that's why it's included. So for the C1 zoning district, for example, takeout, carry out, those type of things are special exception uses. Gelato and stuff didn't really fit under just restaurant. It fit more under like takeout and stuff like that. So to meet in the middle, we just made a specialty. So I don't know if that answers your question more, but yeah.
All right, so in that, so the page 8, so we're required number of parking spaces. So then, so we're adding restaurant specialty, but we're literally copying the same parking requirements that we have for restaurants. That, am I missing something there? It's the exact same, right? So we're just inserting this restaurant specialty, but we're saying it's the same parking requirements as a standard restaurant. I mean, I guess that makes sense, but.
Right, I think the distinction is that those gelato places where you could take it to go, they don't fit within the definition of restaurant general. So yes, it's the same parking requirement, but the distinction is how the food is prepared and where the consumer eats the food. So the parking is the same, but it's again just to put into the code.
It seems like it would be less. You'd have
That's what I was
less
thinking, yeah.
of a parking requirement,
Right,
so.
because your cars are moving more.
It's just a comment. I'm not,
Yeah.
but I know parking is a big deal, and in shopping centers and having multiple tenants, like the Subway and the Rancho Chico, it almost seems to me you could stick more of these little specialty restaurants in a big shopping center if you allowed less parking, yeah, so you'd have more of them. I don't know.
But also, please take a note that is also linked or related to the gross floor area. And just to consider those specialty restaurants, they are usually small.
There's tiny, okay.
So then it will require less parking,
Okay.
because they are, with regard, they don't have too many seating. So, and then, our main concern was, we got it, hello, planning and zoning or community development. Can I put on this plaza and gelato place?
Yeah.
Well, let me see. I opened the book, we opened the book, we don't have that use. All we have are restaurants, So we were truly needing to include the use. The most important part is that we are including this use. And obviously, once you include a use, you need to park your use.
Yeah.
So that's the reason we put our hat on our existing part of the code that is the restaurant, and considering that they are smaller square footage, so they're gonna need less parking.
Okay. Hmm. Will this help the tiramisu guy? I know that restaurant went out of business, but the folks that are in there, I know there was a big parking issue with that restaurant. But this doesn't address any of those parking issues?
That restaurant, when it actually had a variance, years
Uh-huh.
ago.
Right.
So they can open the doors.
Okay.
So, yes, it had a variance to address the shortcoming of the parking.
Right, okay. And this would be like, so the freestand, not that there's a lot of freestanding locations, but this is typically for like tenants in a shopping center, right?
Yes.
Like more geared towards that, okay.
A small gelato place or a small coffee shop that they only sell coffee, they don't sell food,
Okay.
just those little
Yeah,
places.
I'm
that
thinking
we
about the
don't have
panini
that
guy up there on, in John Zuccarelli's building there on Tequesta Drive. He's a good example, specialty.
Eat Italiano,
Yeah, yeah.
and they serve lunches.
Yeah.
They serve also lunches.
But that would be a good
Yeah.
definition, especially,
Especially.
specialty, right?
Okay.
Yeah. Okay. Board, any questions? We'll open it to public comment. We'll close it to public comment. Have a motion?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 3-21.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion passes. Okay, whoops. Moving on to ordinance number 4-21.
Okay, thank you. This one again is a bit of a substantive revision. And the version that you all got, staff is recommending one additional modification to that. So should it be the desire of this, EPA to move this ordinance forward, we would ask that you carry forward one additional change, which I'll mention in a minute. But this ordinance makes a change to 78-282 regarding structures that are placed on buildings that are exempt from the building height restrictions of the zoning code. So you'll see we're eliminating the discretionary council approval during site plan, and we're making more concrete what the allowable exceedances should and could be in the village. So as it's drafted, what you have before you is that none of those listed things, chimneys, water tanks, elevator lofts, church spires, flagpoles, parapets, and turrets, can exceed 40% of the height of the building. What we would like to propose that you consider is to further restrict the parapet walls and the turrets, which Melissa can explain to you exactly, hopefully what a turret is. I think I know.
Pink
but-
Castle.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. To limit those to 20%. I think the concern is for, especially in the context of larger buildings, especially parapets, building construction these days gets quite, it's unique, and parapets can be in some cases very, very tall. So to further restrict those, after this was finalized, we are recommending. So, again, the minor tweak there would be to remove the parapet and turret from the second line, and add a second sentence that says for those parapets in all zoning districts, parapet walls and turrets will be limited to the 20%. That'd be what we're recommending to you tonight. There is additional language in there with regard to chimneys. Chimneys are controlled by state law. Those have to be allowed to go a certain amount above the height of the roof for fire protection purposes, so that's why that 4-foot exceedance language is there. And then we also have inserted language to make sure that, depending on what's being put on the top of the building, that it doesn't take up more than 10% of the square footage, basically the area of the building space, so that we're not having, it's intended to capture smaller things like steeples or chimneys or whatever. So you don't have whatever they're putting on the top of the building be the same footprint as the building itself. So we're restricting that to 10%. So with that, I'll answer any questions that you have.
I was going to ask about some of these things being 40% higher is too much. I am curious about flagpoles. I don't have a good example, but that allows quite a large flagpole, 40%.
Flagpoles, typically, if they're going to be the large ones, they're not actually affixed to the building, they're put in the ground.
In the
They're
ground.
Standalone
Oh,
flagpoles, the
I
larger
got it,
ones.
okay. Which would be a different
Yeah, that would be,
classification,
right,
okay.
that would not be in
okay.
addition to the building height.
Okay,
Flagpoles in the residential context, I don't think, that would be kind of a very large flag, I'm not sure that we're having issues with those, but I think the ones you're talking about, those would be standalone. in the
Okay.
ground.
I had read some article, it was in Delray, and how people were building the house, and then they were adding this, like a party area. So they were basically, it was supposed to limit it at 3 stories, and they were putting all this, entertainment so you could get a better view. And it was like a big problem in the residential, on the ocean stuff. And it was something to do with having, they were abusing it. They were literally building it so high, and then they were adding these structures on top of the structure. Is that what we're talking about here?
I don't think that's that's certainly not what necessitated this. I'm not familiar with that problem in Delray.
Okay.
The only thing I can think is that they were maybe building parapets that were just kind of concealing what was happening
They were-
within, but that's not what.
Yeah, it gave me the impression that it was almost like living area where it was like entertainment, and they were putting like palm trees and like an actual living area so that you're up high and you could see out all over your neighbors, and that was a huge problem. And it went to the zoning board. I remember reading the paper, and they're like, we can't be having this. That's what I'm just wondering.
Yeah, I think that's
where this is coming from?
a separate issue.
Okay.
That does sound like a much bigger problem.
Yeah, we are talking about church, like small towers, that sometimes they used to put a clock or something for. So what we are saying is that this small tower cannot go over, it cannot be like a very tall, so it can be only a percentage of the building height.
But isn't there a height restriction of how high you can go, period? Like, isn't it like 30 feet or something?
Well, if you read the code, it had an exception for those type of architectural elements.
Oh, okay.
So, and now that we are trying to be more, we
I
are
gotcha.
actually now providing a height limitation,
I gotcha.
because to answer your question, yes, for example, on the C2 district, the maximum height is 50 feet,
Right.
of the building, but then, what if somebody wants to put a
20-foot parapet.
parapet, it's a little terrace, little
So this,
tower.
so if we change this will stop that.
No, it will allow up to a point.
Up to a
It
point.
will provide a requirement. So basically, what we are saying is that you can have a small tower up to 20% of the height of your building. If your building is 50 foot, then 20% will be 10 feet. This
Okay.
tower can go only up to 10
10
feet.
feet, okay.
So we are, and only can be 10% of the footprint of the building. You cannot have, it's a tower,
And then put a flag on top of it. Yeah, exactly.
So we are trying to.
Yeah, that makes
actually-
sense.
And that's gonna be the same for parapets, right?
Yes,
That's what you're proposing?
Yes.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea, 20%.
Yeah, I agree.
That's a good idea.
Yeah, I think that's a real good idea.
And as Nelson said, this is trying to just put quantifiable measurements in here. The language that in your current code is very discretionary, so this is to give people, in the future, an expectation of where the limit is, basically, so that it's not an open-ended limit.
Okay. We'll open to public comment, we'll close to public comment. Board, any questions, concerns?
I'll make a motion to approve ordinance number 04-21.
Okay. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, let's see. Ordinance number 5-21.
And this is, and Nilsa, if you, I don't know if you want to present this one or me too, but this is your, you see these regularly. This is just an update to the 5-year capital improvements element. So this is the 2020 iteration of that. Last time you saw it was 2020.
Yes, been a while. So last time, we, remember when we did the comprehensive plan amendment, we have a chapter in our comprehensive plan that has the schedules, and the schedule needs to be updated once a year, you know. So it used to be like mandatory, and now it's more after the Florida statute changes in 2011. It's a courtesy, but I think it's a good practice to continue doing this, and then we transmit it to the state. And I'm so happy that our finance director is here, and he actually provided a table, so community development is working with Mr. Q. So with regard to this, and that was those tables that you have in front of you. And I know he's also including this, it's gonna be included yearly now with the budget. Please.
It's, I'm sorry. Yes, it's online as well. It's accessible through our transparency portal. And so if you go online, but as Nilsa indicated, each year we'll be updating this, and it will be part of our annual budgeting process. We'll be presenting this to the council for their formal approval every year as well.
I have a question. In reading this over under lease purchase proceeds, what is a SAN replacement?
The SAN replacement is a kind of a hardware.
Oh.
Computer for storage. It's like a server.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Wow.
Okay.
Server. That was acquired, actually just recently.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Board, any questions?
I did have one little question, just curious on the, almost the last page here, just under water fund renewal and replace or replenishment. I was just curious, Turtle Creek neighborhood, that's like Martin County?
What is the name of that? Turtle Creek.
It says water fund renewal and,
It's water main replacement under, is what it says under it.
Yeah, I know there's some areas, unincorporated areas that we
Turtle Creek, is that Turtle Creek like the Martin County?
provide water to, but I'm not quite certain.
Oh,
I would be
okay.
speaking out of turn. The utilities director.
Oh, yeah, I was
He's
just
not
curious, it was
present.
$662,000. I don't know, just Martin County,
We do provide water to other areas.
Yeah, we provide
yeah.
water to some
Well,
areas.
I did know that, I just didn't know if
Yes.
that's,
The
does
water
Martin
fund,
County
we provide
pay,
water.
subsidize any of that, or?
We?
No, Martin County, this, 662,000, I didn't know.
If there's, I'm sorry, I didn't get your question.
I was just curious if, does Martin County subsidize any of that, like 662?
No, basically, the water and sewer fund, it's self-sufficient.
Oh,
and
okay.
Most of the funding here that you're seeing is generated through user charges.
Okay.
And fees of that nature, tap-in connection fees.
Oh, okay.
But the subsidy from Martin County, I don't believe that that's the case. Most of it is
okay.
recovered through users.
But the users are the ones that are paying for it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Which I believe Nielsen, meeting, we do have some customers who are outside of the incorporated area of Tequesta.
Yes, I did know that, yes.
Yeah.
Yes, definitely our service area for the water plant includes Martin County area.
Okay.
When we did the update of the 10 years water supply plan last year, so we always have to calculate population projection and demand and everything that includes that area of Martin County.
Okay, okay.
Thank you for your,
This ordinance will be moving forward for first reading to the council.
Okay.
Any other questions, board? Can I have a motion? Oh, public comment, again. We'll open it to public, that's okay. We'll open it to public comment, we'll close it. All right. Now we'll move on to the motion. With a flag. No, just kidding.
I'll make a motion to recommend approval of ordinance number 05-21.
I'll second the motion.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries, thank you. All right, staff comments?
No problem.
No comments? Public comments? No public? Board comments, anybody? Then may I have a motion to adjourn, please?
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Do we have a second?
A second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.